Steve, thank you so much for joining Nonstop Nonprofit Podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show and to talk about stock donations and to talk about our partnership as well. But before we jump into that, I'd love just if you could share with our listeners just a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into stock gifting.
Sure. So I'm pretty new to the nonprofit industry, a couple years now. I started my career actually in finance. I was an analyst, and then after business school, did some private equity for a while. I got that startup bug about 20 plus years ago, and joined an early stage software company, and I've kind of been in that world ever since then. Mostly in the marketing, advertising, technology side of it. And so I've always loved finance, loved technology, and my just side note, my mom was a fundraiser, or executive director for American Cancer Society, where I grew up. So I grew up doing a lot of fundraisers, setting up signs at golf courses and tearing them down and doing all that. So I kind of watched her for years, really wearing lots of hats, a small nonprofit, small office of a big organization. And so I think that's kind of always been, fundraising and giving back has always been kind of part of my ethos since I was younger. Donate Stock really started, if you go back over a decade ago. A friend of mine who's a financial advisor was telling me about the benefits of donating appreciated stocks instead of cash. In fact, their entire practice was about going out to these wealthy individuals and presenting to them more tax advantage ways to give, as a way that to show them how they could actually give more and save more at the same time. And he told me about it, and I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. In short, you can avoid the capital gains tax on the stock that you donate, and then you also get to itemize the full deduction, the market value. So if you've been sitting on a stock for 10 years and it's up 5 or 10x, you can really save a ton of taxes while giving the nonprofits a larger pre-tax gift. I thought, wow, that sounds too good to be true. I talked to my accountant, talked to my broker, like, yeah, you can do that. And then I learned why very few people do it, because it was just such a pain. My own experience.
Very hard.
My own experience as a donor, I had to research, make calls. I had to literally send a fax. I had to fill out forms. It was several hours of work, but also just trying to research, understand the process, and all just to make, a more pre-tax, a more advantaged gift. And it was just more hassle than it was worth. And so I didn't do it again. That was over a decade ago. And then about 2 years ago, I was thinking about that. And I assumed somebody had made it easy by now, that someone had digitalized it, made it slick, easy process. And when I realized that no one had, that was really the inspiration. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. Because I was really wanting to get out of the marketing and advertising technology industry, do something that was actually more fulfilling for my soul, something where I could kind of give back while also doing something exciting as a commercial venture. So this is really that was how we started down this path. Like, let's just solve this for donors and see where that takes us. That's kind of how we got started.
Yeah, I found, being an entrepreneur myself, and the sort of best companies are really born from problems that, plagued us at one point in time. And, typically you just see much better traction with product that way. And so I want to kind of double click on sort of the pain that you experienced when giving stock, just because I think this pain is still very much the reality for so many nonprofits. I think this is why so many organizations just aren't accepting stock donations, because of the perceived effort it takes, both on the organization side and also the donor side. So maybe help us understand, just of course not through your company, but how most nonprofits today are going about accepting stock donations and just the challenge it is.
Yeah, well, it's been we call it a biased and broken process. So one, for donors, it's generally been the top 1% who get good financial advice, who then have advisors to go do this legwork for them. But it's a pain as a donor. You have to get information from the nonprofit. You got to fill out forms for your broker. You have to deliver that to them somehow. And that's if you know what to do. If you know what to do, you got to figure this all out from scratch. So it's painstaking. But what we didn't realize till we got into this and started working with nonprofits was the pain points for them, and why very few nonprofits actually have been aggressive in marketing or soliciting or promoting stock gifting. Historically, I'd say there's two major problems the nonprofits face. One is access. Because of these, what are called know your customer and anti-money laundering compliance requirements, the brokerages have a really difficult time opening accounts for small nonprofits, which unfortunately, there's now over 1.5 million. I heard 1.9 million earlier today in terms of new nonprofits, our total nonprofits. And they unfortunately have a high risk propensity for either malfeasance or fraud, or just unfortunately just bad management, financial management. So brokerages have a cost to actually, they have to go get compliance, a waiver to actually create a brokerage account for a nonprofit. The other problem is nonprofits generally don't build assets. They don't build balances. They use the brokerage account to receive the stock, sell the stock, and then move the cash out to their operating account or their endowment fund. So the brokers have had a hard time because they're like, there's not really any money in it for us, but there is a cost. So when we started Not Donate Stock and put a kind of a beta out in early or very end of 2020, and a few nonprofits like, this is great, but we don't have a brokerage account and we can't get a brokerage account. We knew that was a big problem. And then, but those that do have a brokerage account have a different set of challenges in that there's two big problems with stock gifting. One is it's a painful process, and the donors come to you, so you have to kind of walk them through that process, educate them. And most nonprofits really aren't that comfortable, telling anybody how to do a stock gift is just kind of something they're just not very well versed in. Secondly, the way that stock transfers through this archaic financial system that we have, what's called the DTC or depository trust company, is like the transfer mechanism. It takes days for this to happen. There's no transparency. And then when stock actually does hit the nonprofit's brokerage account, they have no idea whose stock it is. So if you donated stock to a nonprofit and did not tell them, I'm donating 50 shares of Apple, they're not, and they just see the stock come in their account, your identity does not travel with it. And that's I think the big disappointment for a lot of donors is, I just made this really nice gift to you and I'm waiting for you to thank me. Send me a note. Maybe give me a call for that really big gift I just gave you. And instead, it's just crickets because the nonprofits don't know whose stock it is. So they routinely get stock transfers in. They have no idea whose it is until the donor reaches out months later asking for a tax receipt. And that's when they actually have to go and research it and say, oh, I'm sorry, what did you give us and when? And we'll go research it and try to find it. Oh yeah, we do have your stock. We'll send you an authorization or acknowledgement. But by then, it's just been a bad experience for the donor. So they're not very inclined to go do that again. Then the other issue is if everybody's donating the same stock.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that anyone would even donate stock, given those hoops you have to jump through.
And the next piece, if you're an organization that receives a lot of stock gifts, what we see is a lot of people donate the same stocks. We see a lot of Apple, a lot of Microsoft, stocks that people have owned for decades, have been around a long time, really large market caps, widely held. So if a bunch of people are all donating Apple stock to a nonprofit, they see Apple coming in 10 shares here, 5 shares there, 10 shares there. They don't know whose stock is whose. And they literally have no way of knowing whose stock it is.
Wow.
So they have to kind of go back to the donor and say, can you confirm that, we got a bunch of Apple stock. We're not sure which is yours. Can you tell us if the shares actually left your account? So it's just a really manually intensive, archaic, painstaking process for the donors and the nonprofits. Most nonprofits, historically, I'd say majority of them, when they ask them to receive stock gifts, like, yeah, a couple, because we have a board member that likes to give us a big gift every year and we have to receive stock. So we know that one stock gift is from him or her, and then that's the extent of it. So that's really why stock is, despite being, frankly, the biggest pool to fish in if you're a nonprofit. I mean, households generally have 10x more in their investment account than they do in their checking accounts. At least that, maybe more, especially in larger, higher net worth households. It's a bigger pool. It's more tax advantage for the donor, but it's just been really hard to get at, or it's just been kind of locked up for decades. So those are the problems that we set out to solve.
Okay. So whenever there is a problem, and specifically with stocks, like how big of a problem this is, for both sort of like parties, the organization and the end user, like the donor who's trying to give, like there has to be a big, and you kind of shared some initial data there, but like, if the problem is painful, usually that means like if you can solve it, there's a big opportunity, to build a business, and a big opportunity for organizations to tap into a whole nother, resource pool where they're just currently not fishing. And so how did Donate Stock solve this problem and make it easier for nonprofits to accept stocks?
Well, I'll start with answer it is a huge prize. If you think there's about 60 million investors out there, roughly over half of US households actually own stock. If you think of 60 million investors, if every investor donated $1,600 a year in stock to all their nonprofits, right, across all their nonprofits they support, that'd be $100 billion in funding for nonprofits. Wow. Individual giving last year was, close to 300 billion. You take away Elon and Bezos and McKinsey Scott, that number gets smaller really fast, right? So stock has the potential to be just really a huge windfall for the giving industry if they could unlock it. So The way we do it is a few things. One is we just make it easy for the donor, make it an easy donor experience where in just a matter of a few minutes, a donor can click on a donate stock button on the nonprofit site, enter their information, provide their brokerage details. We don't ask for a username or a login. We're not asking for their credentials, but just the information needed, and then the securities they want to donate to that charity. And that's it. We'll take that data, send it to their broker, and facilitate the transfer of the stock to that nonprofit. That's if the nonprofit has a brokerage account. But then we also let the nonprofit know, we send them an email, you're going to get this gift. Justin is sending you 50 shares of Apple worth $7,500. And it's in their dashboard too, so they can see that. So they now know Justin Wheeler just made a stock gift to me. It's en route because it takes days to go through the financial system. It's not instantaneous like we're kind of accustomed to. So when they have transparency and visibility in the process, and then it makes it much easier for them to reconcile the gifts. Now, if they don't have a brokerage account, or frankly don't have the team to process all of these, we created our own 501c3, Donate Stock Charitable, so we can actually convert that stock to cash for the nonprofit and just send them the proceeds through ACH. And that's overwhelmingly what they prefer, because they don't like it. It's a pain. It's still a manual process to go. You got to check your brokerage account. You got to initiate a sell order. You got to wait a few days for the stock to clear. You got to then transfer the funds. Then you got to acknowledge the gift. We do all that for them. So it's we can turnkey this entire process for you. And that's for those that are either resource constrained or just so busy pursuing the mission, they don't have the time, effort, or hassle, or to go hassle with this. Then we can make that really easy for them. So it's access to all the nonprofits. So every nonprofit can receive stock. And it's ease and efficiency, removing the friction, both for the donor as well as for the nonprofit. And high level, that's what we do.
Amazing. So you've really solved two problems. One is you made it accessible for all nonprofits to accept stock donations. So you've removed sort of like the potential security risk, the KYC process that a lot of nonprofits just can't go through, or maybe wouldn't pass because of the requirements. And so you're making it possible for making it more accessible. And then you're also making it extremely a lot easier for the donor to actually initiate a transfer of stock to gift to a nonprofit, which I want to actually double click on in a little bit, talking a little bit more about the benefits of stock donations.
Sure.
What I want to come back to is this market size. So you mentioned like $100 billion potential through stock donations, and so I would assume we're still very much in the infancy of stock gifting. So what are you guys doing to really try to move the needle? What's going to be the catalyst, do you think, that will just make this a more mainstream giving method for donors?
Sure. So a few things. So one is awareness. So very few investors are aware of the benefits of charitable stock gifting. It's amazing. When I was starting this, the first probably 25 people I asked of means, only one could tell me about the benefit of avoiding capital gains tax. Everyone's like, well, I know there's some benefits. I'm not sure what they are. And when you explain it to them, the response is like, why do I not know this? It was kind of like one of the best kept secrets in personal finance. It has been for decades. That's why we call it kind of a 1% solution historically. So one is awareness building. We are actually going to we view the financial advisor channel as really the best way to educate their donors, because ultimately as a fiduciary, you should be telling your clients, hey, there's more tax advantage ways to give. So when you're doing your charitable giving, donate stock, you avoid capital gains tax, you get the full write-off. And so they've been kind of loath to do that, because invariably what happens, a client says, oh, that's a great idea. I want you to go donate stock to these 5 charities for me. And then it's a lot of work for the advisor. So like no good deed goes unpunished. So we're actually going to be rolling out a new product for advisors in October, late October, that makes it easy for them to initiate stock gifts on behalf of their clients. And then not only do it for them, save them a ton of time, because what an advisor would have to do is go chase down the charity, get their information, get someone to call them back, get that information, submit the order, and then they'd have to go back and tell them what they gave and when. For them, it's just a lot of work. So we're trying to make it really easy for the advisor to, in a couple minutes, initiate a gift on behalf of the client, and then have a dashboard of all gifts they've initiated for all of their clients. And then when the stock gets received and the donor gets acknowledgement letter, the donor has to click into their dashboard to get their acknowledgement letter. So now the donor has the ability to go do that themselves. So their client, they're like, hey, I'm gonna, think of fishing. I'm gonna get your rod and reel. I'm gonna put the bait on it. I'm gonna throw it out there. You're gonna then, I'm gonna hand this rod and reel to you. So in the future, you can do this yourself. So try to help them become more self-sufficient. That way, advisors can be better fiduciaries, be more outspoken in advising their clients without it burdening them with a ton of work to do that they don't get paid for. So that's how we're going to solve or tackle the awareness problems. And then it's just a matter of enabling and making it accessible and available to all nonprofits. So once people start seeing the stock gifting button in the menus of ways to give, they're going to, if they invest, they're going to like, what is the stock gifting all about? And then once they understand the benefits, they're going to, generally people say, why do I not know this? And why would I give cash? If I have appreciated stock, it's financially irresponsible to give cash. So why don't I just start giving more stock? That's easier. I've got stock I've owned for years. It's just sitting there in an account growing. I can throw a little bit here and there and share my winnings with the causes that I love. So it's awareness and then distribution and access both for the nonprofits and the donors. And over time, the network effect will happen when they start seeing stock everywhere. And then once they do it, and then they can go to their dashboard and repeat that transaction really easily. And then it's like 60 seconds to do it the second time. Then it just becomes a new way of people to give. And we think that over time, that's how we go from, roughly 1 or 2% people donating stock of investors today to 5, 10, 15% over the next, 5 years. So that's really where there's just there's so much opportunity to generate so much funding for nonprofits for good causes, and it's easy. It's just a matter of getting the button out there and making the clients, the donors aware.
Yeah. Awareness is crucial. I think that, like there's very few like fundraising programs where if you just put it out there, it like will have initial kind of like traction. But like if you have a website and you have web traffic, putting an option for people to give stock you're going to see something happen.
We've seen anecdotally so many situations where all they did is announce it, and all of a sudden here goes a 50K, 100K donation coming in, because people aren't going to come to you and ask, hey, do you take stock gift? But
Right.
If you inform them this is a way to do it, it's they're like, yeah, I have a lot of stock. If I can give to you through that, that's a no-brainer.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I have a great story on that. Just real recently, just 2 weeks ago, there's one of our nonprofit clients was having their big annual gala. It was 2 weeks ago today, and they put out in their response card like you can use stock to bid on the auction items, and their grand prize for the auction, the live auction, was I don't know if you're a Yellowstone fan, but it was basically like a weekend in Montana with Cole Hauser, who plays Rip on Yellowstone. Yep. So one of their benefactors informed the people that run this nonprofit. She said, "I'm just letting you know, I'm going to outbid anybody for this prize. I'm going to win this auction as long as I can use stock." You know how much that went for?
How much was it?
$220,000 for this event, right? And it was and honestly, stock enabled it. She couldn't have done that. The only way she could do that was with stock she's had forever. So it's such a great story, and that's what's really fun about. I'm sure you feel the same way. That's what's so much fun about this industry is you can play an active role in helping great things happen, and that's just one example. There's another organization in Miami. I was speaking at a thing there earlier this summer. She went back. They signed up. They put an email out to their board, their donors, and literally within a week they got a $50,000 gift as a group called Putting Stock in Children, I think, or Taking Stock in Children, one of the two. It was real similar to Donate Stock, which is kind of funny. Another one called Chapman Partnership, they announced it and got a $100,000 gift within a week. It's just, there's so many great stories out there. It's just, you've got to just communicate. If you communicate it,
totally,
somebody's going to give you stock.
Yep. I do. I host an annual gala for an organization that I sit on the board of. And last year we were doing like a cash auction, and I run the cash auction component of it. And we always start with like the highest gift amount and, go all the way down to like $100 or whatever it might be. And we were at the largest sort of amount with the night, which was like $100,000. And we asked, anyone tonight can donate $100,000. And, to your point, like most people, especially like savvy investors, have much more in their investment accounts than their checking accounts. Like no one's like raising their hand. There's people with capacity. And I just like flippantly, was like, we accept stock donations if that changes the game. And a couple hands go up and donated 100,000 plus in stock. Most of it was like Apple stock was what it was. Yeah. But it's just crazy how like there's like going back to my original point, like there's very few sort of like revenue programs that a nonprofit could adopt with almost like where awareness, just making it aware that you do this thing actually increases the revenue.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. Another question I wanted to come to was, I think this like was with the whole kind of like meme stock like phenomena that's like happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It has created a lot more like consumer investors, right? Just
Yeah.
investors who are like more casually sort of investing, and
Yeah.
applications and technology making it easier to even to invest. Do you see like that sort of energy and also helping fuel sort of this like new kind of era of giving through stock, because you have younger people like investing and are already used to like
Yeah.
so I'm just curious if you see this kind of sort of like consumer sort of investors playing
We
any sort of
see
role in helping this more mainstream.
we see potential. The main thing that I'll just put out there about stock, to get that benefit of avoiding capital gains tax, you have to have held the stock a year, right? So
Right.
if you bought GameStop and then a month later wanted to donate that, you wouldn't get the same tax benefits, right? IRS says no, you got to hold it a year. So it's really for longer term holdings. But what we are seeing is, the studies show that the younger generations are just much more generous in their mindset. They claim to be charitable, like 60 something percent of, I think, millennials identify themselves as charitable people. Whereas it's like 1/4 of that if you go to the boomers. So it's a very different generational mindset about social awareness and social responsibility. And there are more people, because of the ease of getting into investing, because of all the what happened during the pandemic with all the stimulus money and people staying home and started investing. If you want to call it investing. Some might call it speculating, but whatever. They're getting in the game, right? They're learning and they're getting the taste for it. So I think there's definitely a groundswell of younger investors that are very charitable and benevolent just in their way of being, that as they acquire assets and start having some meaningful assets, they're going to be really a huge force for stock gifting, over the next decade or two. But today, I would say, just some data, we've surveyed our donors, and we're about 500 transactions in now. So we have a pretty good database, and it skews over 55. Like it's households that
Okay.
have assets that, some data points, like our average gift today, if you like straight up average, it's about 22 grand. If you remove the outliers and normalize that, it's about 5,000 as an average, but it's about 2,000 as a median. And I think over time we'll see that probably go down. But an average gift of, let's say, 2 to 5,000, compared to like average, I don't know what you guys, if you guys publish like average
100,
gifts.
120, like
Yeah.
120 is like not like the average online credit card donation.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
I just heard earlier today, one of the top, 5 fundraisers in the country, their average gift is $35. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people. But if you think about, just, if you don't need a ton of big stock donors to do well, but now anybody can donate stock. They don't have to just be a wealthy household. They could be somebody with, hey, I could give you $100 in, credit card, or $500 in stock. I've got, I'll give
Right.
you 8 shares of Tesla. Yeah.
That's what's super interesting is, like these like, $1,000, $5,000, $8,000 gifts that are coming through stock are likely individuals who couldn't just do that with cash. Right.
Right.
And so I think
Yeah.
that's what's so key about making this so feasible and easy for donors to understand. With the headwinds in the economy, and we know that like the biggest sort of like the biggest incentive with stock donating is donating appreciated stock
Yeah.
that's past the year mark. Do you see any sort of like headwinds with like stock gifting as it relates to like the broader markets?
I'm sure it's depressed activity. I mean, I know, I'm sure it has. It has to have, right? So, but what's interesting is most of the stock people are donating, it's not something they've owned long, short term. Like, we see Apple come in, and the cost, the holding period comes in with the data. These are 5-10 year holding periods. People, so 10 years ago, for reference, Apple on a split adjusted basis was about $10-12. Today it's down, right? It's at like under 150, but it's still up 12x in the last 10 years. So,
Yeah.
and they have a concentration issue. So they're like, hey, my Apple stock now is a really big share of my portfolio. I need to harvest some gains. I need to reduce some of my exposure. Gifting is a great way to do that. I think obviously, it'll be a better when it's a healthier stock market. It's going to be better for stock gifting, but we're still seeing donations come in every day. People just, again, people have been sitting on, we had a 12-year bull market, right? Where even if a lot of those big high flyers have really gotten crushed, not a lot of Roku being donated right now, but we still see a lot of, energy stocks and long-term Microsoft. They're down a little bit. If you look at them over the last 5-10 years, they're up, just dramatically. So we still see stock gifting taking place. The other thing, seasonally, like, we're really kind of just holding our breath that hopefully November, December is better now than it is because that's when most stock gifting takes place. More so than other types of gifting, people who are doing their year end, looking at like taking their tax loss harvesting on their stocks, like selling their losers to offset gains. That's a time when a lot of them also figure out to do their like charitable stock gifting or DAF contributions. That all takes place. I've heard like from one of the big DAF managers said that half their donations, half the contributions come in the last 2 weeks of the year. Really, that's when a lot of people do that. So, or last 3-4 weeks. Yeah, it's December, right? So, more so with securities than with cash. So, I think the number is around something like 30% of donations come in November, December, all donations. But for stock, it's going to skew much higher just because of that year-end plan that takes place.
From a strategic perspective, my assumption is it's much more advantageous to donate appreciated stock than to sell losing stock, right? Because like there's a max, isn't there? There's like a max, like I think 3,000 a year that you can write off.
Yeah.
For harvesting tax, and so which there's no max on appreciated stock in what you donate, correct?
Well, there's an AGI limit, so you can donate up to 30% of your adjusted gross income in non-cash donations. You can do about 60% cash. So if you're, and this really applies to people who are kind of have large incomes and are at the stage of life where they're starting to really give away more. They're going to be looking at they're hitting their 30% AGI limits. They might do that, but most people generally don't. So practically speaking, you can give away as much as you want unless you just don't have much income. It's hard to get to 30% if you think about what you make and wow, would I really give away that much in a year? That's a lot. But depending on what your AGI is, you could give away a lot. I did if you remember Elon Musk they reported earlier this year, and they kind of got buried in all the Twitter controversy, but he donated $5.7 billion of Tesla stock to an unnamed nonprofit. I'm guessing it's probably a private foundation. He put it in to be doled out over time. But I did the math on that and wrote an article I published in Bloomberg just a couple of weeks ago. Like, because it was stock he was granted, like it was basically zero cost stock. If you add up the tax benefits, his tax benefits were $4.6 billion in tax avoided or saved with that $5.7 billion gift. And that just speaks to the power. And that was the 5.7 was literally 30% of what he made selling Tesla stock. He had to sell a bunch of Tesla stock, like $20 billion worth or 19 billion. So like to the T, he donated exactly 30% of that to a charitable organization and saved almost $5 billion in taxes. So we look at it as like, just, that's a great example of what's possible. And you don't have to be a billionaire to get the benefits of, the same tax benefits, just at a more, not the same scale, but certainly on a relative basis.
Yeah. Interesting. Super interesting. So one of the things you guys talk about, I think it's on your blog, is one of the key insights you pull out is that like the more an organization diversifies, you start to see sort of like growth by like in the magnitude of like 5x. Yeah. So can you unpack that a little bit? Like how did you get to that sort of 5x growth?
Yeah, that's Russell James. From his reports, he's one of the probably foremost researchers on charitable giving and asset mix. What he found is I forget the exact percentages. I'm sorry, caught me off guard on this, but I think it's something that if your non-cash assets are growing at a rate are more than X percent of your total composition of what you receive every year, you actually have like a 5x higher growth rate in your overall fundraising. Whereas if you're below that, then you actually generally lag the market in terms of growth in your fundraising. So, and it's kind of makes sense. Like if you're getting more larger non-cash gifts, you're going to grow that. And the more you get, the more you tell people, the more you're going to get. It becomes a virtuous cycle. So it kind of makes sense. The numbers are pretty surprising. Literally 5x higher growth rate if you have a larger mix of non-cash assets. And so with stock, could be crypto, could be, those are the most common ones. And obviously crypto is a much newer, and I think we'll find it's probably fairly cyclical. I mean, when crypto's up, you'll see a lot of it. When it's down, probably not. But stock, people have held so long and had established cost base so long. There's such an established mechanism there. We feel like it's a lot less volatile as an instrument for donating.
That makes sense. All right, to kind of wrap up the conversation, really excited to talk a little bit about our new partnership
Yeah.
that we're launching here pretty soon. And so for those of you listening, Funraise and Donate Stock have decided to partner, and we're going to make stock gifting available through the Funraise giving form. As for those of you who don't know, we work with thousands of nonprofits. Millions of donors have given, through the Funraise platform. And we're just absolutely thrilled to be partnering to bring sort of this service to our customer base and to the donors that are giving to nonprofits. And so, yeah, we will be announcing the official partnership here, and I think in the next couple of weeks. But Steve, really excited to be working shoulder to shoulder with you and the team on making this more accessible to another audience that hopefully will take stock gifting seriously.
It's going to be a game changer. Because right now, if you go to most websites and you have to really work hard to figure out how to donate stock to them. Like it's a lot of clicks, a lot of research. If it's right there in the menu as an option to give, it's going to be a game changer. I think it's going to be transformational for a lot of nonprofits that never told their donors you can do that. When the donor sees that, like, wow, I can give stock, and it just takes a couple of minutes right here without leaving the site. Like I think it's going to be really exciting. I can't wait to see the results for this giving season. But we're so excited about the partnership with you guys. We appreciate your leadership and we've been talking a lot of platforms, and there's interest. Everyone says, yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer, but you guys have really emerged as just like really focused and agile. I think is what's the word that comes to mind. So kudos to you guys for being leaders in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're excited about it. And for those listening and are interested in more information, we'll definitely be linking in the show notes, but also we'll be producing more content with the Donate Stock team around further education on how you can start accepting donations via stock. Steve, thank you so much for this great conversation. I found it to be super insightful and appreciate the time you invested in the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it and look forward to more.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
All right, you too.